Thank you, by the way, for coming from Chautauqua. What do you think of this place?
I think it's a fantastic place for a variety of reasons. I like the lake, I like the forest surrounding it, I like the people. Unfortunately, I only could meet a few of the local people. The conference was just beyond anything imaginable.
We had a chance to even meet a Nuremberg prosecutor.
Indeed, right. And of course, this was something that was an extraordinary experience. It was really impressive.
How did you get into this business? I mean, how does Ekkehard find himself working with the Special Tribunal for Lebanon?
I could tell you what would be completely dishonest, that I always wanted to work for any of the international tribunals. No, it was quite different. I studied law, and then I became a judge in Germany, in Bavaria. And there was, after the German reunification, an opportunity to work what was called at the time Working Group for Government Criminality. I liked this work quite a bit, and that gave me the opportunity to work for the German Attorney General's office. And in that context, I did investigations and prosecutions of crimes in an international context. Mm-hmm. I did a case against the Irish Republican Army, and I did a case against the Algerian Front Islamique du Salut. Obviously, both are terrorist cases, right. And I'm now doing, 20 years later, again a terrorist case, which is mere coincidence, I think. And that was the point in time when I got really interested in crimes that are committed in an international context or have some international meaning. And then I read by coincidence an opening at the Yugoslavia Tribunal in 1998, applied for it, got an interview, got the job, and it was meant from my end for 2 to 3 years. I wanted to do one case.
Right.
And of course the cases take usually a bit longer than 2 to 3 years. So I stayed for 5 years at the Yugoslavia Tribunal. The ICC was established, got interested in the ICC, applied, got the job, spent more than 5 years at the ICC. I ran the confirmation hearing in Lubanga, the first case, and then I thought the time has come to move on, and about 3 years ago I made it to the Lebanon Tribunal, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon.
Here you are, 3 years, been at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, and really deals with a very specific incident, the assassination. And you have the indictments, the arrest warrants are out there, they've been authorized by the court. Not likely to actually have the defendants in court, and so you're preparing a case in absentia. And as I understand it, really the last time that's really occurred is Nuremberg, Martin Bormann. Do you actually look back to see how they handled it at Nuremberg?
You will be surprised to hear that we actually did.
Yeah.
And of course there are slight differences in terms of, not slight differences, there are substantial differences in terms of the evidence. At Nuremberg, as problematic it was to run a trial in absentia against Bormann, but the evidence was overwhelming because he had signed documents which were self-evident. Mm-hmm. So all the problems that generally arise with a trial in absentia were sort of mitigated in that particular situation. Our evidence, without going into any detail, is quite different. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are problems along the lines so the defense counsel don't get instructions. What does it mean? Does it mean can they run alternative defenses? This potentially, or not potentially, likely prolonging the trial. Can they agree to facts? Can they stipulate facts? All questions that didn't arise at the Yugoslavia Tribunal or the ICTR or the ICC. So we are facing a situation that's, at least considering the recent developments, is a novelty, and we will find a way, and we will have to find a way to deal with it.
Do you have a mandate from the United Nations, right?
Right. Okay. It's a Chapter 7 established tribunal.
Do you have a mandate regarding timing and budget? Because that seems to be a theme throughout all the tribunals, is it money?
That's an unfortunate reality for all of the courts and tribunals. We have a 3 years mandate. We now have the second 3 years mandate. The first 3 years mandate finished by February of this year. It was renewed for another 3 years. I guess, and I actually think there is an expectation of the international community that we can complete the trial within the current mandate. This might or might not be the case. It really depends how a trial in absentia trial unfolds. There is a potential for completing the trial, but there's certainly, in my view, no realistic expectation. There should not be a realistic expectation that the following appeals proceedings would also be completed within the current mandate.
There was a lot of hue and cry after the assassination. Something needed to be done.
Yeah.
Now, many years later, what's the feeling in Lebanon? Do the people care?
I think that's one of the most important questions, and I have been a couple of times in Lebanon. Of course, I only get contact with the local population within a very limited extent, but I talk to people who are from Lebanon, and I get mixed messages. That's quite interesting to see. The Lebanon Tribunal is still high in the news. It's still a high priority, certainly in politics, no doubt about that. But the normal person on the street, that might be a bit different. There seems to grow a sense of let's move on, which of course is not something we consider being the right approach. But I still see, and I have reason to be optimistic, that there's first an interest in what we are doing, and there's of course an interest and an expectation that an internationally created tribunal will be in a position to run a proper trial and contribute to ending impunity in Lebanon.
I think it was your German newspaper that actually leaked the indictment of the names themselves. Right. How difficult was that for the tribunal to sort of deal with that issue?
That was one of the most difficult situations. It was soon after the establishment of the tribunal, soon after it started to work on the 1st of March 2009. It was Der Spiegel who got to know the names and started to leak that the perpetrators are linked to Hezbollah. And of course, at that point in time, the investigation was still under full steam, and no final conclusions could be drawn at that point in time, at the very early stages of the STL's investigation. Of course, there was the predecessor, the UNIIC, but there was a shift on the focus on the investigation, and it was very difficult to manage this in terms of responding to what has been leaked, and it had an impact, though a limited impact from hindsight, on the investigation, but the names were out. It was out that the tribunal, or the OTP of the tribunal, was focusing its investigation on what seems to be supporters of Hezbollah, and it didn't help. It certainly did not help.
What other obstacles are you finding? I know the Lebanese government changed.
Yes, indeed. That was an obstacle, but it was not an obstacle to the extent one could have feared. There was a fear that with the change of the government, cooperation would sort of crash. But this was not really the case. Cooperation continued, maybe in a bit of a different way, and maybe in a way that temporarily slowed down proceedings, temporarily. And of course there are still areas that are very delicate for the Lebanese government, for the obvious reason, and of course with the change of the government it became even more delicate. But in general terms, the Lebanese state is cooperating, and our requests for assistance are responded to.
Are you you're looking forward to this sort of a 3-year window of trial? Will you be part of the trial team itself?
Yeah, I will be part of the trial team. The prosecution division is headed by the chief of prosecutions, Darren Mundis, and then there are currently 2 senior trial counsel, and I'm one of the 2, and a number of more junior counsel. Mm-hmm. So I will play a role in that trial.
Will the defendants have counsel?
They already now have counsel.
Okay,
yes, they already now have counsel. The day following the decision of the trial chamber on trial in absentia, the head of the defense office appointed counsel. So they are properly defended. Okay. And they have good counsel. Yeah. They have internationally recognized counsel.
When does the trial begin? Get a trial start date?
We got a trial start date just recently. It sort of came unexpectedly. We didn't expect that the pre-trial judge at this point in time would render a decision on the trial date. He was very careful. He actually labeled it as a tentative trial date. The date is the 25th of March of next year, but he included 3 caveats in his decision. The first one, the arrest of one or more of the accused. Not necessarily particularly likely, but one never knows. Then the second caveat is the potential amendment of the indictment. It is publicly known that at a certain point in time earlier this year, the OTP tried to amend the indictment, but for procedural reasons, and I really emphasize this, for merely procedural reasons, the pre-trial judge dismissed the application. So this is in the air, mm-hmm. And of course, in case the office of the prosecutor would like to add one or more inductees, that would also change, or potentially change the trial date. So 25th of March, it's out there. There's a potential, possibly a likelihood that we will start on the 25th of March, but there's also a potential that it will be a bit later.
Yeah. Life after, as you look 10 years down the road, where would you like to end up? Is there
It's very hard to say. I got to understand that it's very difficult to plan. Mm-hmm. I certainly continue to find the work of the international tribunals and the work I was doing there professionally satisfactory. So I would hope that 10 years down the track I will still work in that area.
We're here at the you're basically sponsored by the Robert Jackson Center. In your world, what does Nuremberg and Robert Jackson mean to you?
Nuremberg and Justice Jackson obviously mean a lot to me personally, and I want to add in this context that prior to coming to The Hague, I was actually a judge at the regional court in Nuremberg, and my office was literally next to the courtroom 600, so I was reminded of this literally every day. And whilst I was at the ICTY and whilst I was at the ICC, I actually took fairly big groups of lawyers to Nuremberg, and this was and is for me a daily occurrence almost. So to answer your question, Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trial, of course, and Robert Jackson, they mean a lot.
In Germany, what's the impact of the Nuremberg trial with regards to, that was an opportunity to try the Nazis, to lay bare the atrocities that occurred during that time period. What was the aftermath for the German people? Did they not want to hear it, or did it impact them? Did it lead to democracy, more democratic thinking?
Yeah, obviously I was born in 59.
Yeah.
But I got quite interested in exactly that question, so I think I can somewhat authoritatively talk about it. From what I got to understand, in the immediate aftermath of the war and following the Nuremberg Tribunal, the German people did not really want to hear it. it's unfortunate. They didn't want to believe it, and of course a trial was meant, and it did bring out the truth, and it was a hard truth for the German people. And the immediate reaction was, we really do not want to hear it. But that has changed quite dramatically, and it has changed within a couple of years. It took some years, but it has changed quite dramatically, and people got really interested in it. And of course, it's still a live issue, and it should still be a live issue. And I think the majority of the German people are interested in trying to understand what have been the reasons for what has been done. And the Nuremberg trials are still high on the agenda, and on TV you can see repeatedly documentaries about the Nuremberg trials. So it's there, it's a live issue.
Well, you're alive. I just really appreciate you coming here.
No, a great pleasure.
Yeah, to come to Chautauqua, enjoy the sun and the fellowship. It's just a delight to have all of you folks here, because I know it's often lonely, and not everybody appreciates it, but to have a chance to recharge.
Definitely. I mean, this was an event that is extraordinary. It's unique, and I was very impressed by everything, literally by everything, starting with the hospitality, the level of the discussions, the very many things we could address within a matter of 2 days. It was just incredible, and I will certainly benefit from it.
Well, thank you very much. Tell Daryl not to come next time.
I'm sure it's quite interested to come next time.
And Norman, forget it.
I'm pretty sure actually that next year it will be Norman who will participate for the Special Tribunal for Lebanon.
Well, he was here. He was here a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I realized that. I realized that he knows the place.
Thank you so much.
No, great pleasure.